The twin moons hung over the palace of the Alien Empress, their light glowing softly against the silver towers that touched the stars. Inside those grand walls, everything was perfect except for one terrible thing. Every night, the twin daughters of the Empress cried without rest. Their voices echoed through the marble halls, high-pitched and heartbreaking. No one in the Empire could sleep. The Empress, known across galaxies as the ruler of 10 star systems, had fought wars and won. She had destroyed fleets with a single command. Yet she could not stop her own children's cries. Every healer, every doctor, every alien scientist tried and failed. Strange lights, medicines, and energy fields were used, but nothing worked. The babies wailed louder each time someone tried. The palace workers walked carefully, afraid to even whisper. Many said the children were cursed. Others believed some dark spirit haunted the nursery. Guards avoided that part of the palace after sunset. But one night, as the twin moons glowed brighter, a single human janitor continued his quiet work in the lower halls. His name was Eli Carter, a simple man from Earth. He had come to this alien world to earn enough to care for himself after losing everything in a war that destroyed his home. He was not strong, not rich, not important, just a man with tired eyes and a kind heart. The aliens often ignored him, but he didn't mind. He cleaned floors, repaired things, and spoke politely to everyone. That night, as he mopped the long crystal hallway, Eli heard it again, the same cries he had heard for weeks. Only now they sounded closer, sharper, filled with pain. He stopped. The sound came from the upper floor, the royal nursery. Every alien worker nearby had already left. Eli looked around. He was alone. He knew he shouldn't go near the Empress's chambers. Humans were not allowed without permission, but the cries were so sad, so helpless. They reminded him of something long buried, his own daughter's cries years ago before she passed away on Earth. His chest tightened. He closed his eyes for a second, then dropped his mop. "I can't just ignore that," he whispered to himself. Step by step, he climbed the stairs. The walls glowed faintly with alien runes. The air smelled like soft flowers, but behind that beauty was a deep sorrow that weighed heavy. As he reached the large golden doors of the nursery, he saw 2 guards standing like statues. Their armor shimmered under the moonlight. One of them raised a weapon. "Human, stop! No one enters." Eli bowed his head. "I'm sorry. But the children, they sound in pain. I only want to help." The guards looked at each other, confused. "You help the royal heirs? You're just a janitor." Eli smiled sadly. "I know. But maybe they just need someone to listen." Before the guards could answer, a weak, trembling cry came from behind the door. Then another. The sound broke even their cold discipline. One of the guards sighed. "Fine. But if anything happens, you'll answer to the Empress herself." Eli nodded and slowly pushed open the door. The nursery was beautiful, filled with floating stars and glowing butterflies made of light. Yet in the middle of all that beauty, 2 small alien babies lay in shining cribs, crying endlessly. Their skin shimmered like moonlight, their eyes glowing with tears that sparkled as they fell. Eli froze. For a moment he just watched, heart aching. Then gently he took a step forward. "Hey there." "Hey, little ones," he whispered softly. The babies stopped crying for half a second. Their glowing eyes turned toward him. The room fell silent. Even the floating lights seemed to pause. Eli slowly knelt near them, his voice low and calm. "It's okay. You're safe. No one will hurt you." A tiny hand reached out, a small, glowing hand, and grabbed his finger. The warmth of that touch felt alive, almost like energy flowing through him. The baby's crying softened into a faint whimper. Outside the door, the guards stared in shock. "What in the name of the stars?" one muttered. Inside, Eli sat on the floor beside the cribs, gently humming a soft tune. It was an old Earth lullaby, one he hadn't sung in years. His voice was rough but warm. The twins listened, their eyes heavy with sleep. Slowly, their cries faded completely. One by one, they closed their eyes. The entire palace seemed to hold its breath. For the first time in months, silence filled the royal nursery, and in that silence, under the twin moons, a single human janitor unknowingly changed the fate of an empire. Morning light fell gently across the golden towers of the Empress's palace. For the first time in months, the halls were quiet. The workers moved without fear. Even the guards, who had spent countless sleepless nights hearing the twins' cries, could finally breathe. but no one knew why the crying had stopped, except two guards standing outside the royal nursery. They kept whispering to each other, still shocked. It was the human janitor, one muttered. He just walked in, and they stopped. The other shook his head in disbelief. Impossible. No one, not even the royal healers, could calm them. He must have used some trick. While the rumors spread like wildfire through the palace, Eli Carter, the human janitor, continued his morning duties quietly. He carried his mop and bucket, pretending nothing had happened. Yet inside he felt something warm, something peaceful. For the first time since he lost his daughter back on Earth, he had felt that same calm he once felt while watching her sleep. As he swept near the main corridor, a deep, cold voice echoed through the hall. "Human," the guard commander said, stepping in front of him. "Her Majesty, the Empress, demands your presence." Eli froze, gripping his mop tighter. He knew what that meant. The Empress was powerful, proud, and known for her temper. If she believed he had disrespected royal law by entering the nursery, he could be executed. But still he nodded quietly and followed the guards. They led him through the massive crystal doors into the royal chamber. The air was thick with silence. The Empress sat on a throne made of living light, her long silver robes flowing like liquid stars. Her eyes, bright violet and sharp as blades, watched him closely. Around her stood her council and several alien nobles, whispering among themselves. When Eli entered, the whispers stopped. "So," the Empress said, her voice calm but dangerous, "you are the human who entered my daughter's room." Eli bowed his head respectfully. "Yes, Your Majesty." "I meant no harm." Her eyes narrowed. "Do you know the penalty for entering a royal chamber without permission?" "Yes, Your Majesty," he replied softly. But they were crying. "I couldn't just walk away." The Empress's gaze darkened. "You speak as if you care for them. Tell me, human, what power did you use? How did you silence their cries when my best physicians failed?" Eli took a slow breath. "No power, ma'am, I just sang." The room filled with murmurs. The council members exchanged confused glances. The Empress raised her hand, silencing them all. "Sang?" she repeated coldly. He nodded. "An old song from Earth. My daughter used to fall asleep to it. I thought maybe your little ones just needed comfort." Her expression didn't change. "Comfort? They are royal heirs, not simple infants to be comforted by songs." Eli looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time. "Maybe that's the problem, Your Majesty. Maybe they just need love, not treatments." A wave of gasps filled the hall. A human, a janitor, had spoken boldly before the Empress. The guards took a step forward, but the Empress lifted her hand, stopping them. Her voice lowered, quiet but sharp. "You are either very brave or very foolish." Eli said nothing. He simply bowed again. "I understand. If I've offended you, I'll accept my punishment. But please, don't let the children cry again. They deserve peace." The Empress stared at him for a long time. Her heart, hidden under years of pride, felt something she hadn't felt in a long while. The human's voice reminded her of a simpler truth, something no science or power could replace. At last she spoke. "The twins have not slept peacefully since their birth. Last night they slept for 6 hours. You will tell me what you did, every detail." Eli nodded. "I sat near them. I spoke softly. I told them it was okay. Then I sang." The Empress leaned forward slightly. "And they stopped crying?" "Yes, Your Majesty," he said quietly. "They held my hand. Then they slept." The hall fell silent again. One of the royal healers whispered, "Perhaps the human carries some frequency unknown to our kind." Another replied, "Or maybe it's emotional resonance." But the Empress wasn't listening to them anymore. Her mind was elsewhere, on her daughter's small faces, their peaceful sleep, and the strange warmth in the nursery she had never felt before. Finally, she rose from her throne. "You will return to the nursery tonight," she said firmly. "If they sleep again, you will stay as their caretaker. If not," her gaze hardened, "then you will answer for entering my private chambers." Eli bowed again, his heart beating fast. "I understand, Your Majesty." As the guards led him out, the nobles whispered among themselves. "A human caretaker for royal heirs? Madness!" one hissed. Another muttered, "Or maybe destiny." That night, Eli walked back to his small room in the servants' quarters. He looked out the window toward the glowing palace towers and whispered to himself, "Guess I'm singing again." He didn't know that the next night would not only test his courage but also open the Empress's heart in ways no alien or human ever imagined. The twin moons rose again, casting pale light over the shining palace. The air inside was still and heavy, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something. The Alien Empress stood in her private chamber, staring at the holographic report floating before her eyes. Every record said the same thing. The human janitor, Eli Carter, had done something no one else could. Her daughters had slept peacefully. The Empress, ruler of 10 galaxies, didn't believe in miracles. She believed in control, in strength, in science, and yet one powerless human had achieved what her entire empire could not. Her mind whispered dangerous questions. Why him? How? What does he have that we don't? When the twin babies began to stir again that night, the royal nurse hesitated. Normally, she would call the medical team immediately, but this time she glanced toward the Empress's throne and whispered, "Your Majesty, should I summon the human?" The Empress's violet eyes flashed. "Bring him," she said softly, though her voice carried power that could shake mountains. Moments later, Eli stood once again before the golden nursery doors. He could feel the eyes of guards on him, some curious, some angry. His hands were shaking, but he took a deep breath. The memory of his daughter's tiny hand in his still lived inside him. That was his courage. The door slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside, the room shimmered with soft starlight and glowing dust. The twin alien girls were crying again, their small bodies surrounded by waves of blue energy from their cradle shields. Their cries were painful, filled with fear, not hunger. Eli stepped forward carefully. The nurse whispered, "Be careful, human. Her Majesty is watching." He froze for a second, realizing what that meant. The Empress was observing him through the walls, through hidden eyes, testing him. Every move mattered. Eli knelt beside the cribs. "Hey there, little ones," he said softly, his voice trembling just a bit. "You're not alone. I'm here again." The baby's cries grew quieter, curious. One reached out toward him, her tiny glowing fingers brushing his hand. That small touch made his heart ache and heal at the same time. He smiled gently. "You just want someone to stay, huh? Yeah, I understand that." Then, as before, he began to hum. The same simple lullaby, an old Earth song full of warmth, love, and memory. The melody floated through the air like a soft breeze. The alien lights in the room dimmed on their own, as if the palace itself listened. The twins' breathing slowed. Their glowing eyes fluttered closed. Their tiny hands clung to his sleeve. Within minutes, the nursery fell silent again. Eli kept humming a little longer just to be sure. When he finally stopped, he whispered, "Sleep well, little stars." From behind the hidden walls, the Empress watched everything. Her expression was unreadable, her sharp face caught between disbelief and emotion. Her daughters had never reacted to any sound, not even to the healing songs of the high priests. Yet they responded to him, a human. The head scientist beside her spoke quietly. "Your Majesty, there is no known explanation. His voice has no unusual frequency. Perhaps emotional energy from humans affects the infant's neural patterns." The Empress didn't answer. She was too focused on the gentle way Eli stroked one of the children's tiny hands. Something inside her chest tightened, a feeling she hadn't known since before she became Empress. It was peace. Finally, she turned to her council. "Leave us." When they were gone, she entered the nursery herself. Eli jumped up immediately and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty." The Empress walked closer. The twin babies slept soundly, glowing softly in their cribs. Her long silver cloak brushed the floor as she stood beside him. For a long time, she said nothing. The silence was heavier than her words could ever be. Then in a low voice, she said, "What you did, I still do not understand." Eli stayed quiet, unsure how to answer. The Empress continued, "You have crossed into places where no human has ever been allowed. You touched what even my own healers cannot touch. Do you know how dangerous that is?" He nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Then why do it?" she asked. He looked up at her, tired eyes calm. "Because they were crying, and no child deserves to cry alone." The Empress's face softened just for a second, then hardened again. "You speak boldly for one of your kind. But remember this, human." She stepped closer, her tall form casting a shadow over him. "If I ever sense deceit, if any harm comes to them, your life will end before your next breath. Do you understand?" Eli bowed deeply. "I understand, Your Majesty." The Empress turned to leave but paused at the door. "Be here again tomorrow night," she said without looking back. "We will see if this miracle lasts." As the doors closed behind her, Eli exhaled slowly. He looked at the sleeping twins, their small glowing faces calm and beautiful. "Guess I'll see you again tomorrow. Little ones," he whispered, smiling. Far down the corridor, the Empress walked alone beneath the moonlight. Her guards could not see it, but her lips moved ever so slightly, humming a faint echo of that same human lullaby. Night returned to the shining palace once again. The twin moons hung over the crystal domes like silent watchers. The air was calm but heavy with expectation. Everyone waited to see if the human janitor's miracle would happen again. In the great nursery, lights dimmed to a soft golden glow. The royal nurse stood by nervously, hands folded, while the guards whispered among themselves. They didn't understand why the Empress had allowed a human, a janitor no less, to enter again. Then the doors opened, and Eli Carter stepped inside. He looked tired but calm, carrying nothing but his old mop and a small cloth bag hanging from his shoulder. He nodded politely to the nurse, then walked to the cribs where the twin alien girls lay, glowing faintly in the dark. The moment they sensed him, the babies stirred, making small, soft noises. The nurse gasped. They know you." Eli smiled faintly. "Babies always know who cares." He knelt beside them, his hands resting gently on the edge of the crib. "Hey, little stars," he whispered, "I'm here again." Their eyes glowed brighter for a moment, then softened as they recognized his voice. The room fell quiet. Eli reached into his bag and took out something small, a tiny wooden flute, old and cracked. The nurse blinked. "What is that?" "It's from Earth," Eli said softly. "It was my daughter's favorite thing. I used to play it every night before she slept." He raised the flute to his lips and began to play. The sound that came out was simple, but it carried warmth deeper than any music the aliens had ever heard. It wasn't perfect, some notes cracked, some faded, but each one was filled with emotion. The melody floated through the air like a soft wind carrying memories. The twins stopped moving. They watched him, blinking slowly, their tiny hands relaxing. The lights around them shimmered gently as if dancing to the rhythm. The lullaby was one of Earth's oldest, something humans once sang to their children before machines replaced bedtime voices. As the tune played, it carried with it the essence of love, loss, and peace. The palace sensors detected strange energy waves in the nursery. Unaware that hidden cameras were watching him again, Eli just smiled at the sleeping children. "There you go. It's okay now," he whispered between notes. "You're safe." Hidden behind the observation screen, the Alien Empress stood silently, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The sound of the flute reached her ears and something deep inside her stirred, a long-forgotten ache. She turned to her royal scientist standing beside her. "Analyze that sound frequency," she commanded. "Yes, Your Majesty," the scientist replied, tapping his glowing device. Numbers appeared in the air. The tones are unremarkable. No special energy, no advanced vibration, yet somehow the children's heart patterns are stabilizing. Their energy fields are synchronizing with the human's rhythm. The Empress frowned. "So it isn't science, it's emotion, Your Majesty," the scientist said quietly. The Empress looked through the screen again. The human continued to play, his eyes soft and distant. She noticed the small tear rolling down his cheek as he whispered the last few notes. Eli finished the tune and gently placed the flute aside. The twins were asleep, peaceful, glowing, dreaming. He stayed beside them for a moment, smiling as he whispered, "Sleep, little ones. Dream of skies that never end." The nurse covered her mouth, astonished. They're truly sleeping." When Eli stood up, he turned to the guards and bowed. "My work here is done for tonight." The guards, once suspicious, now looked at him with quiet respect. As he left the nursery, the nurse whispered to one of them, "He's not just a janitor. He's something else." Moments later, the Empress entered the nursery herself. The room was silent except for the soft breathing of her daughters. She walked closer to the cribs, her sharp eyes softening as she saw their tiny hands resting together. For the first time since their birth, they slept peacefully. She looked down at the wooden flute left on a nearby table. Carefully, she picked it up. The old instrument felt strange in her hand, so fragile, so human. She brought it close to her chest and closed her eyes for a moment. A faint melody echoed in her mind, the one the human had played. It made her remember something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. The sound of her own mother's voice from her childhood on her homeworld, before she became Empress. That night, as the moons crossed paths in the sky, The Empress stood by the window of her throne room holding the flute. She whispered to herself, "How can something so weak feel so powerful?" No one answered. But far below, in his small servant room, Eli sat quietly on his bed looking at the empty space where his daughter's picture used to be. For the first time in years, he smiled and whispered, "Thank you, little ones, for letting me be a father again, even for a moment." And in the royal nursery, the twin daughters of the Empress dreamed, not of their shining empire, but of soft green fields under an earth sky they had never seen. The next morning, the palace was buzzing with whispers. Word spread through the shining halls that the Empress's twin daughters had slept peacefully again. Not for minutes, but through the entire night. No healer, no priest, no alien scientist had ever managed that. But a human janitor had. Guards, servants, and even high-ranking nobles talked quietly behind closed doors. "He must have some hidden power," said one. "Maybe human songs contain secret frequencies," said another. "Or maybe the Empress herself is testing us," whispered a third, afraid to even speak the man's name aloud. Yet, at the heart of it all, Eli Carter knew none of it. He had returned to his cleaning duties, quietly sweeping the endless marble floors as if nothing had changed. He didn't crave attention or praise. He was just glad the children were resting peacefully. But his calm day ended the moment 2 armored guards appeared before him. "Human, Her Majesty summons you," one said in a deep voice. Eli blinked, unsure. "Now?" "Immediately." They escorted him through corridors of shimmering glass, past towering alien statues, and into a private chamber behind the royal throne room, a place few had ever entered. The doors sealed shut behind him with a soft hum. Inside, the Alien Empress sat by a window overlooking the twin suns. The light shimmered across her silver robes, making her look like a living goddess. Yet her eyes, though proud, held something tired, something human. "Approach," she said softly. Eli bowed. "Your Majesty." She studied him for a long moment. "Sit." He hesitated but obeyed, sitting on a crystal chair across from her. The silence stretched. The Empress finally spoke. "The lullaby you played. My daughters sleep to it now. They smile in their dreams. Tell me, what is that song?" Eli looked down at his hands. "It's called Hush, My Little Star. It's an old song from Earth. My daughter used to love it." The Empress's gaze softened slightly. "Your daughter?" He nodded slowly. "She was 6. She had the brightest laugh. Every night before bed, I'd play that song for her. Even during the war, when the bombs fell and lights went out, she wouldn't sleep until I played it." A faint tremor entered his voice. "Then one night, I couldn't. We lost everything. The next morning, she was gone." The room fell silent. Even the air felt heavier. The Empress's expression changed, less like a ruler, more like a mother who understood loss. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "No parent should ever lose a child." Eli smiled faintly. "Thank you, Your Majesty. That song, it's all I had left of her. When I saw your daughters crying, I just felt something, like she was telling me to sing again." The Empress turned her gaze toward the twin suns. "Your song healed what our empire's best could not. Not through power or knowledge, but love." Eli shrugged gently. "Maybe sometimes love is stronger than knowledge." She looked back at him sharply, surprised by his boldness, but she didn't correct him. Instead, she asked, "Tell me, Eli Carter, why do you think my daughters respond only to you?" He paused, thinking carefully. "Because you're surrounded by people who fear you, not love you. And your daughters can feel that fear. But me, I'm not afraid of them. I just see 2 little girls who need warmth." The Empress lowered her head slightly. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to her like an equal. Not a servant, not a soldier, but a soul. She whispered, almost to herself. "Warmth. That word has no meaning in our language. We replaced it long ago with logic and duty." Eli smiled softly. "Then maybe it's time you brought it back." There was silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. The Empress stood and walked toward the table where the small wooden flute rested. She held it carefully in her hands. "This piece of wood," she said, "holds more power than my empire's most advanced machines. That humbles me." Then she turned back to him. "From this day, you will no longer clean floors. You will stay in the nursery as the royal caretaker. My daughters trust you, and I will trust them." Eli's eyes widened. "Your Majesty, I'm honored, but..." "No," she interrupted softly. "You've earned it. They need you." He bowed deeply, hiding the emotion in his eyes. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I'll care for them as if they were my own." As he left the chamber, the Empress looked once more at the glowing sky. For the first time in her reign, she didn't feel like a ruler, but a mother who had been reminded of what truly mattered. And somewhere far below, in the nursery, her daughter stirred softly, as if sensing the quiet change in the air. Weeks passed in the palace of the Alien Empress, and something extraordinary began to happen. The once cold and silent halls were now filled with laughter, the tiny musical laughter of the twin princesses. Their giggles echoed down the corridors where only sadness once lived. Servants smiled again, guards spoke in softer tones, and even the palace garden seemed brighter. The reason for this quiet miracle was simple. Eli Carter, the human janitor who was no longer a janitor. He now spent his days and nights caring for the royal twins. He fed them, played with them, and sang to them when they couldn't sleep. He taught them words from Earth, simple things like smile, sun, and love. The babies often repeated his words in their small alien voices, making everyone around melt with emotion. The Alien Empress watched all of this from afar. Her people had always seen humans as weak, emotional beings, useful only as workers or assistants. But this one human had done what no alien intellect could. He had touched hearts. One afternoon, the Empress entered the nursery quietly. Eli was sitting on the floor, building tiny wooden toys from scraps of alien material. The twins sat beside him, clapping their glowing hands, fascinated. He looked up and smiled politely. "Good afternoon, Your Majesty." The Empress crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "You build toys?" Eli chuckled softly. "Children don't need royal jewels, ma'am. They just need something to hold, something to imagine with." The Empress tilted her head. "You teach them to play, not to command." He nodded. "Yes, because one day they'll rule with hearts, not just crowns." The Empress fell silent. His words echoed inside her mind like gentle thunder. No one in her empire had ever dared to suggest such a thing. Her people believed in logic, hierarchy, and obedience. But when she looked at her daughter's joyful faces, she felt something new, a warmth spreading through her chest. Later that evening, as the palace lights dimmed, the Empress summoned her royal advisors. "The twins are progressing," one said proudly. "Their mental development is now 30% higher than predicted." Another added, "Perhaps the human's presence is producing beneficial emotional waves." But one advisor, older and stern, frowned deeply. "Your Majesty, allowing a human to hold such influence is dangerous. They are unpredictable, ruled by emotion. He could use this connection against the throne." The Empress turned her gaze toward him, calm but firm. "If emotion is weakness, then explain why my daughters only sleep when he is near. Explain why they smile only at his voice." The advisor had no answer. He bowed his head in silence. The Empress continued, "You all value strength, yet you forget the kind of strength that does not destroy, but heals. The human has shown us that." The council fell quiet. The Empress dismissed them with a gesture. That night she went once again to the nursery, not as a ruler, but as a mother. Eli sat beside the cribs, humming softly as the twins drifted to sleep. The Empress approached quietly. "They adore you," she said softly. Eli looked up. "They're amazing, Your Majesty. Smart, kind, and a little mischievous." A small smile touched her lips. "They get that from their father." It was the first time she had ever mentioned her late husband, who had died before the twins were born. Eli nodded respectfully. "I'm sure he'd be proud of them. And of you." The Empress looked down at her daughters, sleeping peacefully, hands still glowing faintly. "You've done something impossible, human. You've reminded me that they are not symbols. They are my children." Eli smiled. "And you're their world, Your Majesty. They feel your heart even when you hide it." The Empress stood in silence for a long moment. Then softly she said, "Teach me." Eli blinked, surprised. "Teach you, ma'am?" "Yes," she said. "Teach me what it means to be warm, to feel as humans do." Eli hesitated, unsure if he had heard her right, but her tone was sincere. He nodded slowly. "It's simple, really. You start by listening, not commanding, and sometimes you just hold someone's hand." She looked at him, confused but intrigued. Then she reached out awkwardly, placing her silver-gloved hand in his rough, human one. For a brief moment, a quiet spark of warmth passed between them, a pulse of life, real and gentle. When she withdrew, her heart felt strange, lighter, alive. As she turned to leave, she said softly. "Tomorrow you will dine with me, human. We will speak of this." Warmth, Eli bowed respectfully. "I'd be honored, Your Majesty." As she walked away, her reflection shimmered in the glass corridor. For the first time in years, she didn't see just a ruler. She saw a mother, and a woman who had begun to feel again. And in the nursery behind her, the twins slept peacefully, wrapped not in silence, but in the soft, human warmth that had begun to change the entire palace. Years passed since the night the Alien Empress's twin daughters first slept peacefully. The palace that was once cold and silent had turned into a place of life, laughter, and light. Across the empire, people began whispering stories about the human who brought warmth to the throne. Some said he used magic. Others said he carried the lost spirit of an ancient star. But those who met him knew the truth. He simply carried kindness. Eli Carter, once just a human janitor, had become more than a servant. He was now known as the keeper of the twins, and to the Empress herself he was a teacher, a friend, and a reminder of something her empire had long forgotten. Heart. The twins, now grown into graceful young princesses, often walked through the palace with joy that touched everyone they passed. Their laughter was no longer a mystery. It was proof that love, even from another species, could heal what power never could. On the eve of the Galactic Unity ceremony, the Empress prepared to speak before leaders from across the stars. It was the largest gathering in the history of her reign. Every alien race, every noble, every emissary filled the grand hall, waiting to hear what the mighty ruler would say. But before the Empress took the stage, she turned to Eli, who stood quietly in the corner of the preparation chamber. His hair had turned gray, his face lined with years, yet his eyes still carried the same calm warmth as when he first entered the nursery long ago. "Eli," the Empress said softly, "tonight, the galaxy will listen. I want them to know your story." He shook his head gently. "Your Majesty, I'm just a man who sang a song. You're the one who changed the empire." The Empress smiled faintly. "No, you reminded me what it means to be alive. Tonight they'll hear that truth." The great hall glowed like a sea of stars. Thousands of beings from different worlds stood in silence as the Empress walked to the center platform, her daughters beside her. Their luminous gowns shimmered with colors unseen by human eyes. When the applause faded, she spoke. Her voice echoed across the chamber, strong but full of feeling. "Many years ago," she began, "my daughters could not sleep. No medicine, no science, no wisdom of this galaxy could bring them peace. But one night, a simple human, a man who cleaned our floors, walked into my palace and did what we could not." A murmur spread across the crowd. The Empress raised her hand for silence. He did not use power. He did not use knowledge. He sang a song, an earth lullaby. Her eyes found Eli in the front row, standing quietly among ambassadors. "That song was born from love, not command. And that love changed my children, and me." The Empress looked out across the hall, her gaze steady. "For too long we believed that emotion made us weak. But this human taught us that compassion is the truest form of strength. From this day on, the empire will no longer be built only on order, but on heart." The crowd was silent, moved beyond words. The Empress turned to her daughters. The twins smiled at each other, then stepped forward, holding something in their small glowing hands, a wooden flute. "This," said one of the princesses, her voice soft yet clear, "belonged to Eli Carter of Earth. It carried the melody that healed us. Tonight we will share it with the galaxy." The other twin lifted the flute and began to play. The melody floated through the vast hall, gentle, pure, filled with memory. The alien lights dimmed, and for a brief moment the stars outside seemed to pulse to the rhythm of the song. Beings of every kind, warriors, kings, and commoners, stood frozen, their hearts stirred by something ancient and universal. It wasn't just a lullaby anymore. It was a bridge between worlds. Eli closed his eyes, tears sliding down his weathered cheeks. He could almost feel his daughter beside him again, smiling in the way she used to before she slept. When the song ended, silence filled the hall once more. Then slowly applause rose, not thunderous but soft and heartfelt like rain on a quiet night. Even the most stoic of alien generals wiped their eyes. The Empress raised her voice once more. "Let this melody be our gift to the stars, a song that reminds us all that even the smallest human heart can calm the loudest storm." She turned toward Eli, her eyes shining. You came here as a worker and you leave as a teacher. The Empire owes you a debt that no crown can repay. Eli bowed deeply. Your Majesty, you've already repaid it. You gave meaning back to a song I thought was lost forever. The Empress placed her hand over her chest, then bowed her head in respect, an act no ruler of her kind had ever done for a human. And as the twin daughters smiled beside her, the galaxy bore witness to something far greater than politics or power, a lullaby that had crossed the stars, and a human heart that had changed them forever.